There are like a cajillion hops out there, and it can be a little overwhelming venturing into the wide world of hops. But I've got a solution for you. When you start looking at lists of hops, it can be kind of daunting. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of different kind of hops. They all have interesting and unusual names, and they can run the gamut of flavor and aromatics from piney and resinous to fruity and citrusy or floral or even really funky and weird. And so when you're working to build a beer recipe and you're trying to pick a hop, it can be a little overwhelming trying to sort through everything that's out there and decide on what hop is right for your beer. Enter the s.m.a.s.h. That stands for single malt and single hop, and it's a way of making a beer that lets you get to know a malt and get to know a hop in a clean and straightforward way. A s.m.a.s.h beer can be really simple. You can even just make it out of dry malt extract if you wish. And it's pretty cost effective as a way of getting familiar with a specific hop. First off, you're going to have to choose your ingredients. So you're going to need a malt and you're going to need some hops. Whether you're brewing all grain or extract, the malt is relatively important to the final brew, especially when it's one of two variables that you're selecting. And there's a whole bounty of different malts you can choose from, both in all grain forms and in dry malt extract. So you want to read up on them, get to know what that final flavor profile is going to look like, and then choose one that you think is going to complement the hop that you're working with. There are a ton of different resources out there for learning about different hops, and we'll put some links in the description to books that we recommend about hops profiles. But what you need to know is basically that each hop carries its own flavor. Just like every fruit out there tastes kind of different, hops are the same way. But the heart of the issue is they have different levels of acids and they have very different flavor profiles depending on which hop you choose. So when I'm making a s.m.a.s.h, I like to choose a really big flavorful hop, something that I can really get to know, like Cascade or Mosaic or Fuggles or Nelson Sauvin, which tastes a whole lot like white wine grapes. Then once you've picked your malt and your hop, it's time to select your yeast, and I would recommend using a clean fermenting yeast like USO5 or SO4, just something that's going to get in there, make a good clean beer, and not put off any phenolics or esters that are going to get in the way of your understanding of how the malt and the hop work together. There are lots of beer yeasts that could work, but a well-known clean fermenting beer yeast is what I would recommend for a s.m.a.s.h style beer. A s.m.a.s.h is generally just an ale, but you can lean a little bit into a style. Maybe you want to lager it using a lager yeast instead of using one of the ale yeasts we talked about. Or maybe you want to go really heavy-handed with your hops and make like a really juicy IPA style beer. Whatever style you're leaning into is going to dictate how much malt or dry malt extract you're going to be needing for your recipe, and there are lots of calculators out there that can help you build a beer recipe and really dial in how much malt you're going to need for the quantity of beer you're making. And again, we'll put some links in the description. But even using those recipe builders, it is going to be up to you to decide how much hops and when to add those hops. Because if you add them early in the boil, you're going to isomerize more of the alpha acids, and that's going to lead to more bittering in your beer. The later you're adding hops in the boil, the less bittering you're going to get from them. And if you add them really late in the boil or in the whirlpool after the boil, you're going to get almost purely aromatics. I would recommend doing a little bit of both. A little bit right at the beginning of your boil, and then a little bit maybe 5 minutes before the boil ends. And of course, when you're selecting that yeast, you want to match your yeast to the style. And I would really recommend straying away from really yeast-heavy styles, like maybe a Belgian style, because you really don't want the yeast to kind of obfuscate what you're getting out of the malt and hops. I know I've said it like twice already, but a clean fermenting beer yeast is really best for a s.m.a.s.h beer. And then our last recommendation is to brew more than one s.m.a.s.h using the same malt and hops. Really tinker around with it. Maybe go heavy on bittering in your first batch, heavier on aroma hops in your next batch, and then kind of find a middle ground of the two for your third batch and really get acquainted with how the hop and the malt play together. And like everything in homebrewing, it's really helpful to keep detailed notes. So that way, if you find something that you really love, it's repeatable going forward, and you're not having to kind of reinvent the wheel to make that beer again. I think a smash beer is a super educational way of making beer, especially if you're making beer with friends, because a lot of folks don't even know the intricacies of hops. They just know that beer has hops. And so making a smash beer with a friend who's kind of dabbling in the idea of getting started homebrewing can help them understand how that ingredient works in a beer and give them some ideas for future brews of their own. I'm curious from you, do you make smash beers? Have you made a really excellent smash beer that you recommend to everyone? Maybe it's Cascade and Maris Otter? Let us know in the comments. And of course, make sure you hit that subscribe button below this video so you don't miss any of the future content from us here at CraftaBrew. Until next time, I'm BC, and I hope you've got good things brewing.